What is up, everybody? Welcome to session 3 of the COVID-19 special edition virtual life Bible study from City on a Hill. It is kind of cold today, a little rainier. We had a great weekend, great weather. Of course, I'm homeschooling. Jessica and I are homeschooling our 3 kids right now, and the good weather makes a huge difference in our overall success. Recess, I remember as a kid, was a big part of my day. And as it turns out, it's still a big part of kids' days today as well, because my children love going outside, and their ability to focus and their sleeping patterns and everything are so much better when they have had time outside. And it was beautiful this weekend. I think we probably spent over 10 hours between the Saturday and Sunday just outside, eating lunch, eating dinner, face painting, throwing frisbees, playing on the trampoline. It was a great time. And then we wake up Monday and we have rain, and now Tuesday it is also pretty rainy and cold, but hopefully going to clear up for this afternoon and tomorrow at least, give us a little bit more of that wonderful weather before the Texas summer gets here. It's the little things, the little things that we find that are so make such a big difference in our days. Just want to say, first of all, how pleased I am with how this study has been going, the feedback that I've gotten, the excitement right now is really, I think, surprising and awesome. It's hard to be excited about things that are so drastically different than what you're used to. People are creatures of habit. Change is usually not something that is met with great reception, and I have heard nothing but really positive things from the majority of my classes. Some of you I know have struggled with getting everybody together on a Zoom meeting, just a couple of the classes, but the overwhelming majority of the classes have had tremendous success. And I love seeing the screenshots. Charlie Anderson, shout out to him. He did a little screenshot of his class, and that is so cool. It's just so cool to see God's people adapt to really, strange and difficult circumstances. And this week, I know I'm starting to hear of a lot more jobs ending for people, and I think the economy is only going to continue to struggle. And so we need to be vigilant in prayer. If you're somebody that is in that position, if you don't have food, if you don't have essential things, then please let me know. We want to be able to get you connected with as many resources as we can to make sure that you're not really, really struggling during this time. So please notify me. I can keep that confidential. It's not something that you have to feel shame about, but do not hesitate to reach out to me, because I would love to know how we can meet your needs, minister to you in this time. I'm excited about this lesson today. It's a little different approach than what I've done before. Typically, I will kind of pick a passage or a book and then just go through it verse by verse. That's what our typical life Bible studies have been doing. Of course, if you've been with me from the beginning, we covered the gospel according to Matthew last year. About midway through the year, we began Genesis, and we're tracking through Genesis at a pretty good pace until all this happened. And even up into sessions 1 and 2, we had just like a set passage that we were studying. This morning, I'm going to do something a little bit differently. I was thinking this week about the different measures that we have had to take since this pandemic began. And it's been kind of fun to see the study develop, because it really wasn't planned this way. I just sort of started doing it because I knew something needed to be done. Week 1, we titled that session Slow Down. And what we talked about was this great opportunity that many people have been given, where their schedules are changing, maybe they have a little bit more free time, and we can use that free time to just sort of slow down and reconnect with the people in our homes, people through social media and on Zoom meetings. It's really amazing right now when I open up Facebook, I'm seeing so many people do Zoom live on Facebook, and they're bringing in people that they haven't connected with in forever, and sort of just doing these experimental conversations on social media, and it's really strange, but it's kind of awesome too, because people are connecting right now in a way that they weren't prior to this. Week 2, we said wash your hands, right? I mean, this is an important part. The CDC recommends at least 20 seconds with soap and water. Sanitizer, of course, is a good substitute, although you should be washing your hands. Don't just use sanitizer. Sanitizer is a good sort of second measure. This week, I wanted to continue the trend. I feel like each session has been titled as sort of an encouragement to you during this pandemic. Slow down, week 1. Wash your hands, week 2. This week, here's what we're going to say: keep your distance. Keep your distance. Social distancing is a big thing that we're hearing a lot about right now. The benefits of it, flattening the curve, you've probably heard that. All the counties, Tarrant County that we're in and surrounding counties, Dallas, Denton, Collin, Montgomery, all the ones that, Johnson County, are all putting into place a stay-at-home or shelter-in-place. There's probably a difference between those two, but the way the counties are using them right now interchangeably doesn't really help make that case, so I'm going to use them interchangeably. I know there's rules out there. I've seen them. I'm just saying that the counties themselves are really not following those rules. They're using shelter-in-place and stay-at-home kind of interchangeably. And there's reason for that. Social distancing is important. Sports have come to a halt right now. Of course, church gatherings, a big part of our week, is with large groups of people. Non-essential activities that involve going out in public and being with large groups of people all have come to an end. And there's a reason for that. Because the less we are in contact with people physically, the less likely this virus has the potential to spread. Social distancing is a big part of our lives right now. It's something that we're having to do. Keeping distance from people is difficult but necessary. And I got thinking about that this week. I was thinking about, examples maybe in Scripture where there's a kind of social distancing, certainly not what we're doing right now, but maybe just a kind of social distancing that is comparable in some way to what we're living in, that maybe we can draw some principles or lessons out of and be inspired or encouraged in some way by those things. And so I got thinking, and then it hit me that the Apostle Paul is such an incredible example to us right now. I think it's easy when we are having to keep distance from people to feel discouraged that we are not able to make the kind of impact that we could make if we were still gathering. That ministry is in some ways halted or handicapped, that there are maybe things that we could be accomplishing right now that we just can't be because of these social distancing measures. And it got me thinking about the Apostle Paul. And of course, we know Paul from a variety of stories and major highlights throughout the New Testament. His radical transformation, his conversion on this Damascus road where Jesus blinds him, and then he has to go and he's prayed for and he receives his sight back and is born again. And we know him from the miracles that he performs and from the incredible teaching that he does and just the variety of things that he is involved with in the New Testament. Paul is like one of the most well-known, probably other than the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, we probably would put like Moses and Paul. I mean, he's one of the biggest names in the Bible. And it got me thinking that perhaps his biggest impact that he had, his most lasting impact, was not the churches that he planted, although he planted many churches. He was a missionary. He went on 3 missionary journeys in his life. Those are chronicled in the book of Acts. He plants many of the churches to whom he writes his letters, his epistles to. But really, when we think about his lasting impact, the impact that he has still today on the church, it is the letters that he wrote. The letters, writing these letters. And it got me thinking specifically about 4 of his letters that he wrote in the New Testament: Ephesians, Colossians, Philippians, and the letter to his friend Philemon. 4 letters, and they all have some very interesting things in common. All of them are written to churches other than Philemon. Philemon was an individual, but Philippians written to the church in Philippi, Ephesians written to the church in Ephesus, Colossians written to the church in Colossae. Ephesians, of course, was written to believers in Ephesus, but to be passed along to other churches in the area. It's one of the few letters that Paul wrote that deals more with the universal church than the local church, but that's a topic for another time. But it's interesting, they have that in common. They're all written to believers, churches. They all reference the supremacy and the deity of Christ. They all deal with very practical topics and issues for Christian living. They warn against false teachers. I mean, there's a lot of things they have in common. They're written by Paul, and Paul is kind of doing a lot of the same thing in a lot of the letters, just applying them specifically to local scenarios. But there's one thing that those 4 books also have in common that are really important for us right now in this COVID-19 pandemic, and that is, wait for it, they were written when Paul was sheltering in place on house arrest. That's right. You heard me. Paul served a Roman imprisonment, something that scholars refer to as his Roman imprisonment. It was a 2-year imprisonment. Many of you are probably aware of that. Acts 28, the very last chapter of the book of Acts, talks about, he goes through this incredible journey in the latter portion of 20, I think like 5 through the end, where he asks to appeal to Caesar, and they unbind him and begin transporting him to Rome, and then he's shipwrecked for a while, and there's all kinds of crazy things that happen. 28, he finally arrives there. The believers there greet him, and it says that he stays there for 2 years during his imprisonment. Now here's what's interesting. In some of the earliest manuscripts that we have, the Western Byzantine manuscripts, include a phrase that's not in all the manuscripts, but in some, from his own home or outside the camp. There are 2 phrases that we find there. And what's interesting about that is that when you look at the Roman practice of imprisonment for nonviolent crimes, oftentimes they would allow citizens like Paul, who was a citizen of Rome, to serve out his imprisonment under watch from one of the guards of Rome's soldiers in the home of the individual that was sentenced. So Paul is in his home. He is likely chained to a guard, a rotating cast of guards. It wouldn't have been the same man more than likely. But he was allowed to stay in his own home. He wasn't in a prison cell. He would have been in the comfort of a very small, but his own place. And it was from that place that he wrote Philippians, Colossians, Ephesians, and the letter to Philemon. And so it got me thinking, it's just very interesting that Paul is this individual who he thrived in going and being with believers. He thrived in teaching and preaching. I mean, that was very clearly his gifting. He was planting churches. He was involved in the lives of so many people, and he talks about it in his letters. I desire to see you again until my coming. You know, there's all these phrases where he wants to be with the believers that he's writing to. But at this point, he couldn't be. He was sheltered in place. He had a stay-at-home order, if you will, under house arrest during his imprisonment. And here's the important lesson that I think we get from this, is that Paul didn't allow those circumstances to deter him from doing the things that he believed God called him to do. Paul used that opportunity in house arrest to continue to minister to the churches that he was writing to. He used it to witness for evangelism to the guards. In fact, when you read in these books, and you'll see it in the study guide today that will be in the link, there's a link for it in the description below, you will see that he used this opportunity to share the gospel in such a radical way that almost all of the imperial guard came to hear the mystery of Christ. I mean, this is amazing stuff. In fact, by the time we get to Philippians, when he writes his farewell at the end of that letter, he says, all the saints greet you, especially those of the household of Caesar. I mean, people in Caesar's household were coming to faith because Paul used this unique experience, being trapped in his home in Roman imprisonment, not only to minister and disciple to the churches that he was responsible for, but to share the gospel to those who were responsible for him. It's really fascinating. It's really fascinating. And throughout the letters, you see him say things like, Paul, a prisoner of Christ Jesus, or remember my chains. He's drawing on this idea that, hey, I'm in prison. I may be imprisoned to Rome, but ultimately, I'm a prisoner to Christ. Ultimately, I receive my orders from Christ. And so while I may be trapped here, while this may not be the most ideal circumstances, while I desire to see you again, while I desire to gather with you again, I'm not going to let this time stop me from being used by God. And so I just want you this week to think, do the study, look through the passages. It's more of a topical study. But I want you to be thinking about how God can use you in two ways while you are sheltered in place. Number one, how can God use you to encourage and edify the church, believers? What practices can you be doing to pour into people that you know and love that are part of this church body at City on a Hill, or if you're a part of another church body, wherever you are, those people? So that's the first way. How can God use you to impact believers? But secondly, how can God use you to share the message of the hope of the gospel of Jesus Christ with someone who doesn't know Him during this time? How can you use this unique experience where you're having to stay home more often than not? How can you use modern innovation of technology with social media to impact people who don't know the Lord? How many? I saw this on Facebook earlier. The UTA BSM shout out Gary Stidham. He called them Corona conversions. I like that. That's really great. A Corona conversion. How many Corona conversions could we see during this time? God is not limited by this, right? God is not limited. The gospel is not limited because you have to stay home more. And we've been given incredible tools that make it to where, man, we still have as much contact with people as we did before we were sheltered in place. We're just not with them in person. But with FaceTime, with Zoom, with text messaging, with email, there are so many incredible measures that you can take to continue to reach and impact and edify believers and share the gospel with non-believers. Will you rise to the challenge?
And finally, one last thing, although it's a little bit risky, a little bit dangerous, you've got to use caution, but I would suggest maybe writing a handwritten letter to somebody in the church, somebody that maybe you're in class with, somebody that you see on a regular basis but haven't seen lately because of all this pandemic that's going on. Write them a handwritten letter. There's one letter by Paul I love at the very end. He says, I write these words with my own hand. You know, Paul's practice normally would have been to have a scribe or somebody write while he dictated what he wanted written. But for that one letter, he wanted to make sure that they knew that he wrote it personally. And I think that's so cool. It's so personal. It will have the same effect for people that you write to as well. There's just something about getting a letter that's handwritten from somebody that's just extra special. And on that note, quick shout out to Holly Franklin. She wrote my daughter Camellia a letter. She teaches Camellia in the upstairs Sunday school and wrote her a postcard. And so that was really exciting for her. She was so excited to see it, to have someone think of her and write a letter. It was really cool. So I challenge you to do that. Last but not least, as you probably have guessed at this point, we will not be meeting in person for Easter, but we are planning on a pre-recorded service that's going to have multiple angles. It's going to be much higher quality than the normal live stream because it will allow us to really shoot it and get the different angles and do some post-production work with lighting. We'll have full worship, full music. James and I will be preaching out of 1 Peter. We're really excited about that. Michael from Turtle Moon Films, he's the guy that, he's a member of our church, first of all. He's the one that edits all of these videos. He films my New Testament class. He's filming James' Fearless series for women, which is incredible. If you've not seen the trailer for that, go to Turtle Moon Films YouTube channel. I believe it's up. It's going to be unbelievable when it's done. But he is going to help film this service for us. It will be available either late Saturday or first thing early Sunday morning, so that when you wake up on Resurrection Sunday, you have something to sit down with your family, a quality product. You can share it. You can put it out on social media. And so definitely check that out. Here, come here. Over here. Say hi. This is Lydia. Say hi.
Hi.
Say keep studying the Bible.
Keep studying the Bible.
That's right. All right. Hey, praying for you this week. Really, really looking forward to hearing some feedback from you guys. And we will see you next time we see you. Bye.